Good evening, Marc Lowe here in Tokyo, and today I performed in front of some hundreds of people. I don't know how many people were actually in attendance at a curry event. Anyway, this song, actually, I'm using that as a kind of foot in the door, to crack open the door and start this talk, which actually isn't about the curry song per se, but it's about this kind of strange project, you could say, or project that has evolved in strange, even to me, ways, even though it's my brainchild, you could say, from the beginning. It has been, but it's changed and become something else, and it spawned various other projects along the way, perhaps despite itself, and I thought I would use that as a kind of way to work into this as the theme here. 1, 1, 2, 3, ichi, ichi, ni, san in Japanese. And this is ultimately the cover that I designed for the final version of this, and I'll be starting at the beginning and backtracking. 1, 1, 2, 3 in Chinese characters. Japanese, ichi, ichi, ni, san. Last year I did a project. My focus last year was the tetralogy. It was for albums about the COVID pandemic and how I was dealing with it, and also globally how it was, how I saw it, I guess you could say, or how it was evolving globally and in Japan specifically. And between, I think, the second and third of the third and fourth parts that I ended up doing, I took a breather, a pause, shifted gears, and I revisited some older material, and I created an album, which, like on Apple Music, it's under compilations now. I actually requested it went there instead of under album. It is an album, but it's older material sort of re-envisioned, called Redux, and it has like Black Nail and Dials in the Bathroom and other songs like this from my back catalog.
Change your life. Change your life. Change your life. Kneel down. Kneel down. Cast your strife. Cast your strife. Don't drown. Don't drown. Give them a sign. Don't loud. Hang up your pride. This dark shroud.
This year, in addition to having created quite a bit of new material, and I want to talk about the new material and the older material because they have converged in new ways this year. There's been more actually of me actually drumming, and not just like using loops and or programming drums on the keyboard, or even with pads in my room like I've done, which is closer to live drumming because I'm actually striking and drumming, but those are like electronic pads that are MIDI, digital USB connected to my computer. But also there's been more live drumming, you could say studio drumming, where I'm using acoustic drums and recording them, and or live, where I've been performing drums combined with backing tracks, electronic backing tracks often. So the line between acoustic and electronic, that is blurred more and more. My acoustic material more and more has backing ambient tracks. Sometimes they're organic samples, sometimes they're literally, things I create in Logic with MIDI and effectors, and usually the organic samples too have some effectors or loops or something, but they're, I sometimes use organic recordings of nature sounds, for example, or sounds around my apartment like running water or the fan or whatever, and effectorize it. In any case, going back to this old meets new, or what's new is what's old, and what's old is what's new, or however that expression goes, or might apply in this case. So Redux was like a special project that it was like the in-between breather, where I went back into, literally, it's my laptop computer from some years ago that has those older Logic files in them from as far back as 2017, I guess, 2017, 2018, 2019, up to around 2020 or so. This is where I'm going with this. So with Tetralogy, I started revisiting these earlier pieces and rearranging them. And as I spent more time in the studio playing the guitar, and then realizing that, actually the first piece I ever fully improvised, and it was completely spontaneous, and I was recording it, and I released it at one point, and I think I've pulled that since, but it was an in-studio live thing during COVID, right, when I wasn't performing live and wasn't yet fully vaccinated during the summer, was the song Hope, which was, ironically, you could say, the very first piece I did in 2021, or the title track of the first part of what became the tetralogy. It wasn't even planned as one at that point. It was Hope. And I was in the studio, so I remember what it was, is I was going to I don't remember what it was I had forgotten, because I had my iPad. Maybe I was going to put some backing tracks on. I was going to do something else. And I forgot some essential thing. But I had my iPhone and my stand for my iPhone, like I'm using now, to video record. And I just was running through these different songs from my back catalog. And I was like, what can I do next? Blah, blah, blah. And I recorded this whole thing. Actually, the video's on YouTube. It was in the summer. And at the very end, I was playing Chaos. And then from Chaos, I just plucked these two strings. And I was using effector pedals on my acoustic and some drum machine on the old Zoom G3, which I now got rid of and replaced with a newer one. But and I had the effector pressed down, and I plucked a note which had a sort of reverb extended effector on it, and I started singing Hope, which originally was kind of done that way, right? It was a cappella, it was spontaneous. I started singing Hope, and then I just started sort of playing different things on the guitar, different kinds of chords and things, and I realized, oh my god, at the end of it I had this improvised guitar version of Hope, and I was like, this is kind of cool.
We find the light. We've been through such a very dark night. Where there's hope, the fears they go away. Do not despair, it's the start of a bright new day.
And from that point, I wanted to do a guitar improvised piece, which became The Answer is Inside, which was the title of what became the third part of the tetralogy. and I recorded that sort of, with studio, just guitar. I just did an improv with the effectors and picked it up, and then I improv'd the vocals. I think it was like a week later or something at home. I did it in the studio, and that became a new style for me, right? So the answer is inside. You can find that on YouTube or Apple Music, Spotify, whatever, that song. That was improvised. And then from there, I started improvising more on the guitar, and then I began developing this new style that I'm now working with, which is, a lot of tapping the neck and tapping the body, rhythmical guitar, and this kind of thing, which is my recent style. If anyone who's watching this talk has, watching my recent videos where I'm playing the acoustic, I tend to do this, Bodhidharma and the frog has tapping. I tap out things, and many of the acoustic songs I'm doing now. Bodhidharma and the frog. Sat in the snow until it melted. His eyelids, they became tears. He tried to blink, he saw a frog. And that frog, well, it jumped for glee. And then I'm getting back to where I was planning on going earlier, which is talking about Lowe Tanao, the first collaboration of this year, which influenced the first album of this year, which was The Way Out Is In. I'm not going to talk extensively about the albums previous to 1123, but I want to kind of move up through this year and what I've been up to, and the evolution of the sound that I'm working, or the sounds that I've been working with, which are quite different from 2020, certainly, and prior to that, and then also, evolving from 2021's tetralogy and these improvisational things on the guitar, improvisational vocals, revisiting older songs, but updating them, particularly acoustic things, which I started doing last year with tetralogy, and the other updating things for Redux. So this year, the first album, The Way Out Is In, again, I'm not going to talk too much about it, but because I've talked about it before, but it has this kind of improvised guitar, improvised vocals. That's the main thing on that album. 3 tracks are like this. One actually just takes the vocals out, because I like just the improvised guitar part. So I have the 2 versions with and without vocals. And then there was my attempt at one touch, which turned into like a 15-minute improvisation I did here in my room, and just recorded just the guitar and then the vocals improvised. It started out as one touch, and it became this long sort of forget the past. I called that track One Time. Only one kiss, just for one night. Oh, we'd feel such bliss. Oh, one voice. Oh, you just wanted one touch. This one love. Oh, wow. Yeah. It was only for one time, one kiss, one time, one miss. It was just one fucking mess that I made in my life this one time. I was stumped. Then Omicron was a sort of rearranged or reimagined, much slowed down with less beats and sort of more ominous in a way, but less intensely noisy long piece, which became the sequel to COVID, or like I say, an alternate sort of, COVID from 2020 and then Omicron, and then the piano cover of the IMX song. And this year I also covered North Star and other IMX pieces and put them on Dark Planet, which was 2 albums later. The one in between was what was it? Infinity for Beginners. I forget the title. Infinity for Beginners, which was also a bunch of improvs on there. I played One Touch, my revenge. We call it in Japanese revenge, right? If you something doesn't work out, you want to take revenge. In Japanese, using the English word means not like you take revenge against a person, you take revenge against the thing that didn't happen the way you wanted it to the first time, and you correct your mistake. It's actually a very peaceful form of revenge in Japanese. So I had revenge in that way, and did One Touch on the classical guitar. It was like, I remember it was like the day I started feeling better after I had COVID the first time. I had Omicron twice, and the first time. So, and then that became Infinity for Beginners.
I brave the storm. From out of time, from out of space, some other room, oh, some other space, oh.
On my birthday, the 26th of February, I did an improv live that also is on YouTube, and I start using the Telecaster again. I start using with Tanao. The point with Tanao's story was not just that I collaborated with him, but that the improvs we did in the studio, that's what I forgot to say, led to the way I was in the improvisations on that, and also on Infinity for Beginners. And then I did start developing more my style now. I bought the Guild acoustic, the smaller guitar, which I got used, although it's in almost new shape. Although the top part, when I always do this, live house or somewhere where it has a very low roof, and I take the guitar out of the case and then it has a little chip in it kind of thing. I did this with the Telecaster in 2016. I'm still doing it today. Other than that, it's basically in great shape. And it sounds great, and I love it. And that's become my main guitar. I stopped using a pick. I do everything with fingers. If arpeggios before tapping, and when I play this way, I just sort of play with my fingers or nails or whatever, or I strum with my thumb. So that's changed my style as well. And then there was the Ukraine piece. The improv, which I literally set up for that on February 24th when the news of the war came into my news feed as I was setting up my room to do some sort of improv with the keyboard and USB keyboard and the acoustic. This was before the guild, I think. And that's why that, that video, for example, I was just videotaping myself recording because I wanted to use for a video, and then it ended up being for Ukraine, so. The 6 symphonies, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces here. And the very long pieces, the Bodhidharma's Awakening, Kali Yuga, 100 Seconds in Quarterize, the EP, and these pieces are these kind of mostly instrumental, dark, ambient, or noisy, or kind of soundtrackish, longer pieces that have these kind of, some spoken word bits, some samples, some of it's instrumental. 100 Seconds is very ambient. Kali Yuga is more noisy. I use the electric guitar improv. I used guitar on these. Bodhidharma's Awakening has some songs or song fragments with the acoustic. That's kind of like what I did with Tanao. When we played live, he would do sort of synth backing with his guitar, and I would sort of improvise songs or fragments of songs with the acoustic. It ended up being the guild eventually.
Gods, they envy us, so no one say. One day we are alive, next we'll be dead.
And then, so I finished The Way Out Is In and Infinity for Beginners, and the Ukraine 30-minute, basically, improv came in between that and released that as an EP. So those three I thought of as a kind of set, if you will. And then I did Dark Planet, which was sort of my final statement on this sort of, for me, what had been, and I put it in past tense now, finally, literally, a very, very difficult breakup. And it wasn't just that it was a difficult breakup, but it led me to realizing some things about myself and to working on my own issues.
I need help. I've done bad things and I cannot make them disappear. So give me flesh. Flesh, it'll bring me happiness. 'Cause I feel nothing.
And that's why I think the sort of more sort of Buddhist themes started coming out naturally in The Way Out is In. The way out is in. The only way out of this mental static is to turn a bit inward. And COVID helped me to do that. And then post-COVID, I became and have become a little bit less social, drinking less, socializing less live shows. I have, I do live shows sometimes, and that's cool. And, I put them on YouTube mostly. And my lifestyle's changed. It's another thing too, right? More improv and whatever, using video and so on. But I spend a lot of time alone and in this room and making music in the room, in the studio. I'm teaching literature, so I'm reading and I'm watching the news all the time and thinking about things outside myself.
Cannot see, contaminated. There are places you won't be, they're contaminated. And there are terrors too unreal, contaminated. There are nightmares that you feel, contaminated.
Dark Planet was me trying to close the book or the lid, I don't know what metaphor to use, on the past relationship, which is, it's over 2 years past now, It's like, hey, move on, man, right? It wasn't easy for me. And it's because I was working through my own shit, excuse me for my French, I didn't have to use that word, but in fact it was that, working through my own problems and coming to terms with it.
Well, I'd melt in the kiss by the lies and the guilt that you bring me. Mercy, I was frail in the kill by submission and will that you dealt me. Mercy, when I was down and confused, you just slapped me to make sure that I suffered. Now I suffer, never sleep free. You're my solid sky, all the memories makes my whole world read. I'm on my knees. On my knees.
And, you know, there's this sort of chaos all around us, right? Us, everyone, people, you watching the video, me, everyone. And all the problems we're having with global warming, we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing social unrest. You know, inflation's rising, and right, cost of living going up, wages are not. There's all sorts of tensions everywhere. I'm living in Tokyo. I'm watching the news. I see what's going on, North Korea, South Korea, America, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to talk about politics extensively, but actually I need to in a way, because this does lead in, certainly I mentioned this, right? 6 symphonies, what I refer to the 4 albums as 6 symphonies. And before I talk about 1, 1, 2, 3, although I'm jumping slightly ahead and back at the same time because of the way this thing evolved, it's not linear. But to avoid confusion, what became the 5th part of this 6 symphonies series, there are 4. Number 5 is going to be released on the 11th of November, which actually it's the next release that'll be on Apple Music, etc. of mine. Reincarnations 1 and 2 just came out. I'll mention them later. Those are past recordings like Redux. The 5th part is called Transition. And there's 3 pieces on there. The first 2 are brand new, and the third is an alternate version of Quarterize, which there's actually 2 versions here. There's the Kali version, and the Quarterize EP has a version with beats and samples, talking about global warming and things. And those samples very much matched thematically some of the themes of what became Transition. Transition was not planned even as the 5th part of this, but the themes fit so well. And then I had this further alternate mix I'd done of Quarterize with the samples of all the global warming stuff, etc., but a different mix from either of the other 2. And I liked it. I listened to it again a few times. I was like, I'll release this somewhere. And I ended up doing Transition first, which became the title track, and that deals with, I guess, a sort of Buddhistic or Eastern, you know, in the sense of like the way it's sort of viewed in Hindu and Buddhist and Eastern cultures, you know, ways of thinking about not necessarily reincarnation per se, as it would be in the Hindu sort of way of thinking religion, and you know, that's, again, I'm not going to go into it. I mean, it just, I've said this before, right, that the literal meaning of, that's karma. Karma is action, right? So you action creates, karma creates this energy, and that is, you know, how you act is, you know, there's going to be a result of that, is karma in that sense. But reincarnation too, you know, whether it's this sort of transmigration, literally, that we become, you know, we live hundreds of lives or whatever, or not, that the movement from life to death is a sort of transition, was the idea or the thought I had, and that was improvised too. I just said, you know, it's a transition. Life and death, the boundary or the movement between life and death is a transition. And that's how the title came about, and the title track came about, and I ended up using the same sample I had used, same sample of a Indian guru, you could say, or he's also, you know, talks politics and other things. He's a world leader, Save Soil movement. He's doing amazing things to save the soil, because the soil's depleted all over, you know, and this is going to lead very clearly, if we don't do something, to, you know, further. Well, firstly, it's depleted because of global warming and the way we're messing around. And secondly, the depleted soil means you can't grow things. It's not alive anymore. There's no energy, there's no worms crawling around, and there's no life in it, and so you can't, lead to certainly food shortages, and then that leads to social unrest and war and etc. And you can see what's going on in the world. I just said, right, I'm watching the news. North Korea, South Korea, Russia, Ukraine, etc., etc., etc. A lot of that, some of the political stuff, 100 seconds, which refers to the doomsday clock, by the way. If you don't know what that is, please look it up, the doomsday clock. We're at 100 seconds to midnight. And all these themes. And so transition was life and death mainly. And then the second piece on there, I ended up calling global warning. It was something else originally, longer title or something. So global warming, obviously, global warning, global being globalization, now globalization, things slowing down, and the economy is nosediving, and global warming, it's a warning to us, right? Both globalization and global warming, and the results of these things, which is social unrest and etc. Hence, dictators are born, hence wars are begun, hence there's talk more and more of using nuclear weapons, even if they're tactical. We're talking some serious problem, because and indeed, because even if a tactical weapon were fired in, say, Ukraine by Russia or by North Korea, if a missile in fact lands in South Korea or in Japan or whatever, and even if it's not a nuclear missile, it could just set off, right? Total, as Biden called it, Armageddon, right? He shouldn't have said that probably, but he said it, and it's on everyone's mind. Most of the pieces are like fairly, well, redux too, right? But fairly radically rearranged, remixed, and certainly they sound, I played with the sound, my mixing mastering technique, I don't know what you want to call it, style, the things that I use now, the things that I'm able to use now, in Japanese, what's called okuyuki, or, the creating space or dynamics, even with just two speakers or in the earphones, where it sounds like things are sort of in the distance or closer or moving. I've been playing with that a lot more. You cringe and fried on the inside. Create a space in which to create a world that's all your own, and then don't be devoured by the lie. This reality is created in the mind. Don't fall into the trap of believing that you're not free. You're exactly what you wish to be. This is the truth. Even the older recordings, right? Because if I've got them in Logic, even on the old computer, I can play with those things and create brand new sounding recordings with things that were recorded in, like, say, 2018 or 19. You slept in
crook of my arm. Well, the coldness pierced our bones.
I've got Once Again, The World Disappears coming out later this month. That's all cover songs I've done of various artists. Most of them are older, but I tweaked some of them and I selected them. I didn't, and I have a new mix of Scott Walker's Farm in the City, which has been around. My version's been in circulation, but there's a new mix this year I did of that. That photo was shot the day I recorded the video for Heat/Heathen, that I covered Bowie's Heat and I used part of Heathen and I released it as HEAT and then in brackets HEN, Heat and Heathen. And that video is on my page. Some of you may have seen it. And that I recorded sort of live in my room with the mic, right, and in Logic, and just kind of sang it a cappella, and then later I added the electronic backing.
I cannot express a word. I'm so sad.
And we saw the Joneses' dog.
And beats a little bit. And that again, there's no click or anything. I just, I added some beat loops in there, but it was sung a cappella, totally free form in my room. And I recorded it. I did the video of it as well, so it would be real time as I was recording it. Added the other stuff later, did the video. That day I had put makeup on the one of my eyes to do the video. And when I was doing my makeup or after, I was in the mirror. I don't know why, I splashed water on the mirrors. And I was like, oh, that looks kind of cool. And so with my iPhone, I took some various photos. And this was the one I liked the best. And I cut it and edited it. And I thought, later, after I had done the Heat and Heathen, I thought, okay, let's call this 1, 1, 2, 3, because I had that idea for the title in my head. This was the initial idea. And 1, 1, 2, 3, the songs on there were all these revisited, remixed, remastered, re-envisioned songs. And then I thought, well, I'll put the new version of Heat/Heathen on at the end. I played with that eventually. I found a sample, or I took a sample, I found a recording of this Tibetan Lama talking about David Bowie's death. And Bowie was basically a Buddhist. I mean, people know him as a Christian, like he did the Lord's Prayer. Freddie Mercury died of AIDS, and when he did Live Aid. And yes, he grew up, he was raised a Christian, but he also was interested in Buddhism, particularly Tibetan Buddhism, but also Zen Buddhism, Japanese Zen Buddhism. When he came to Kyoto, he used to consult with a Roshi, a Zen priest, who told him stay in music, by the way, which he did, which was good. He said, that's your Zen. But also this Chime, I think is Roshi. There's a Chimi, 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 Chimi in his early song, Silly Boy Blue. That's apparently a reference to this man. And he says, too, I just used a very short part of the clip that I added, that David Bowie he says in that interview or where he's talking, he says, David Bowie was this part I used, he says, one of the first Westerners, famous artists to come visit me when I came to the States or whatever. And so I knew him well, and I'm very sad about it. I'll meet him in the other world in a better place. So I used that part of the sample. But he also said David Bowie was younger than me, right? So Bowie is a young man in his early 20s, before he was David Bowie, the famous rock musician, before he had struck it big with Ziggy Stardust, and even before that, because the Silly Boy Blue is a very early song from the late 60s. He had made the acquaintance with this Lama, Tibetan Lama. So I added those to Heat and Heathen as a tribute to David Bowie in the audio version. It's not in the video. So that version, I said, okay, that'll go on 1123 as the last track. And the other tracks, like I say, were revisited material that I really rearranged and played with and had fun with, you could say. And also, you know, they sound more updated. And I was thinking about my friend James Izzo. I've talked about him before, The Boy Without Hands. I had a song which I retitled I Love That Boy. He was born without hands, and he was a musician. He did electronic music, played the keyboard with his, you know, he had his arms to hear, but he could play the keyboard and perform and sing. And so that was a song I devoted to him. And I wanted to, again, that's another one I'd rearranged, and I'd pulled it for one or another reason. I won't go into why and so on, but it had been on the third part of the tetralogy, and I reissued it without that track because I just felt it didn't fit. But I wanted to reissue that song in tribute to him, so I did a brand new mix. Last year I had done a new mix, but I further, I really rearranged it, and it's so that's part of 1123. And then also other songs that just, some of them I never, I think, released officially. I mean, I made CDs and sold them at shows kind of thing, but I never officially like released them to the world kind of thing. I don't know who's listening and who's not, but there was Happenings and The Peeved Pear, which was a song that was going to be part of a series of songs about fruits who had personalities. That was the first song I wrote, and that was the last song I wrote, but it's as an autonomous piece. I liked it. I played with the mix and the arrangement slightly on that one, and put that on 1123. What else is on there? The Goon Squad is on there again, totally redone from the earlier version, and other things. And before that, I had been doing like the Reincarnations, which has just been released, part 1, part 2, on the 31st Halloween, and then on the 5th of this month, almost back to back as compilations, which are revisit 30 tracks from my past. And before that, I did Past Life, which I think I talked about in the talk, which also was revisiting some of them rearranged. I did like an electronic version of Chaos that I remixed, and that was in the bathroom. Another version, different than last year's Redux, a radically, you could say, different version of that.
Swirling about me, never slows, never desists. This dog inside me, growing inside me, it never dies, ever persists.
So I was already in my old laptop computer playing around with things, right? And I sort of just couldn't stop once I got started with, it was like, this is good material, but I'm not going to release it as is. Some of the Reincarnation stuff I released as is. Some of those files are lost. They were lost in the 2019, 2020 on the other computer. Some of those I only have, you know, I salvaged the MP4s or the waves, and I could release them, but I couldn't remix or remaster them, and that would have been a huge project if I had done all of them. Some of them I did, the ones that I could. So that was 1123 with that cover right there. You can't see it that well. Can I zoom in? No, it doesn't work. Okay. I can show it later when I edit the video. A close-up of that cover. So that covers, I'm not going to release it with that cover, but I kind of like that photo. Maybe use it for something someday. Anyway, so that was the original 1123. And then I was like, okay, that's it. Here's 1123. I'm going to release it like this cover. It's a single, you know, length running album. And then I started working on some other things. And I was in the studio for a live show. I did a new Interstates of Mind improv. I'd been doing that in the studio last year, multiple versions. I made videos and put them on YouTube. And I wasn't happy with the live versions I had, and I don't know why, but anyway, I tried it live once or twice. I didn't like it. And so this year, you know, my guitar techniques has again changed. It's become even more improvisational, tapping and all this. And so I recorded a version, and I put a video from the studio, and then I did a drum solo atop my LFLZ from last year's also tetralogy. Those are both tetralogy pieces. And I liked the way the studio recording sounded. And the drum is a live in-studio drum improvisation with that. And so I kind of, mixed and mastered them, and they sounded pretty good. I did the videos, and I thought, well, they sound good as audio. So I had those, and I had this other piece. I was working on this longer, sort of dark ambient with some noise piece, and I used actually bits from my last talk about heart, mind, and created this sort of abstract, long, sort of dark ambient piece. And so that started to form a new album with these pieces, the kind of improvisational dark and so on, sort of quite different from, the revisited material from the original 1123 album. But then I found that I don't remember exactly how this happened, but I started just playing around, just for myself. I thought I'll make a playlist. I want to listen to these together, whatever. It's my recent material, things I had done. I started playing around, and then I did Lazarus acoustically in my room, and I did a video for that. And then after I had mixed that, I started playing around, combining that with backing and adding in the version of Lazarus I had done in 2019 or 20. I think I'd recorded it in 2018 actually, but it was released in, I think, 2020. In 2020 on David Bowie's birthday, the I'm a Black Star LP. I did every song from that. So I took that and put that in the background and put some noisy stuff in.
Up here, man, I'm in heaven. I've got scars that you cannot see. I'm so high it makes my brain run. Everyone knows me now.
Got a new version of Lazarus, and then going back to the news and this kind of Kali Yuga and the thing I had released prior, this 4-part series, which then I was talking earlier about transition, with global warming and the remix of Quarter Eyes. Putin started talking publicly about using tactical nuclear weapons. Biden starts talking about Armageddon. North Korea starts ratcheting up things and shooting missiles. One of them came, northern Japan, they set off alarms in northern Japan. So I start thinking about these things, right? And then I revisited this, famous speech by Oppenheimer, the person who invented the nuclear bomb, the H-bomb, which was eventually, used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the destroyer of worlds, he's talking about Vishnu from the Bhagavad Gita. And I've been thinking a lot about Buddhism and Hindu, things. I'm listening to Sadhguru's talks, This political spiritual leader, the Save Soil movement, the guy who does this, and read some of his books and listening to his talks, and think about these things as Oppenheimer's talking about the Bhagavad Gita, the destroyer of worlds. I've got Kali Yuga, the age of Kali, the dark ages we're in. And all these things just clicked and fit. So I sampled that very famous speech by Oppenheimer.
The world will not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that
And I use that sample, and that leads in then to, I created this sort of ambient piece, which leads into then the new version of Lazarus. Then I got the studio pieces. I start combining things in new ways. That longer heart-mind piece with the bits of my talk in it, samples. And it just all clicked. And when I put it into a playlist with the 1123 material, which is older material, and started recombining it in new ways, I started to like it. I thought, it's a double album essentially, but it had an interesting flow to it. And the original version of that, which is the version on YouTube, is under the title Vivid Scars, which is a line from Ashes of the Past, which I had completely remixed and redone in this kind of noisy, dark ambient version with the original vocal from 2018 intact. And Vivid Scars has a bit of a different intro. It's got the Oppenheimer, but used differently in a version of Lazarus that's clean. And I created a new intro. And then, like I said, this sort of ambient piece that flows into the new version of Lazarus, which has this sort of other backing noise and the old version in the background. And then these other pieces, and then that flows into the original 1123 material. The version on YouTube, the ordering is completely different. It's almost the opposite with a different intro in Lazarus. So those two albums are similar but different. And Vivid Scars, I eventually retitled as The World Was Not the Same, which actually is a take. I rephrased what Oppenheimer says. We knew the world would not be the same. So I titled my album The World Was Not the Same. In the cover, again, when I edit this, I guess I can show it, is a photo, again, self-shot I did of myself. I'm alone in my apartment. I don't hire photographers. I just, sometimes I have, I've had in the past, Akiko Honda has taken my photo for things, but recently I've just been doing my own. I was shaving one day, and, I shaved this and I shaved this, and it left just this. And I thought, oh my God, and I have a Jewish background, right? And I think, oh my God, I look like, like Adolf Hitler's mustache. I still had this part. And of course, I'm not going to leave it this way and go to work like this, even though wearing a mask. In Japan, everyone's still wearing a mask. But I thought, I'm thinking about all the things going on politically in the world and all this sort of quasi-fascism in various places. I'm not pointing fingers I'm not going to mention names. There's all kinds of, dark things happening, right? Kali Yuga. And I wasn't going to use that photo. I was going to use this photo, which was actually a part of another photo I had taken the same day, which was just my shadow. And it was my face in my shadow, but I cut my face out of it, and it had this double shadow I liked. And on Facebook, and I posed the question. I said, which cover do you like better, kind of thing. And I took that photo with this, but actually I re-edited it, and there's more shadow on the left or the right side of my face, I guess it would be, but it looks like the left side of the photo. So it looks like that mustache stops here, but then it looks like it just goes all the way around. It forms a C almost. I realized after the fact. Anyway, I posted that one. I posted the one that has the double shadow, and 2 or 3 people, not many people, commented. I didn't expect people to comment so much, but a couple people said the one of your face, and someone said I like both, which I did too. So I ended up using that and entitling it The World Was Not the Same. It's the original 1123, the older material. The newer material at the time with the Oppenheimer, all that stuff landed on that. It's a double album. That will be released. practicing for my next show, which was to use my video backing, and I started with that Oppenheimer thing as an intro, and then I made this sort of video, right? It was 6 acoustic songs with an ambient backing, and on one I did Want with the backing from Ashes, the new version, the noise backing, so that's a kind of new version on both sides. And I did the 6 songs EP from that, which also will be released after The World Was Not the Same in December. And then the 1123 project coming back now into that. So after 6 songs, after Transition, after The World Was Not the Same, which is this double album, which included essentially the full 1123, the original What Was to Be, have been that. Again, here I am dipping back into the vaults recently, 2018 material mostly, on my laptop computer. I start finding some more experimental things that I had almost forgotten about or hadn't thought about in a long time. Some of it, again, like never released. Some of it has been released in some form and pulled. Some of it never released, before release, but things that I'd listened to at one time and thought of releasing. And one of them is like it sounds like an Indian music piece. It has like tabla samples and actually a sample of a guy sort of chanting in Hindi that I had put in, and then the rest of it is actually my vocal, a vocalization improv at the time. There's no lyrics, just and kind of I listened to a lot of Indian classical music when I was in my late teens and early 20s. I was very, very into it. Uh-oh, that died. I gotta pull that back up. I guess maybe I'll leave it off for now. You've seen it. And so I started singing sort of in that way, kind of like Jeff Buckley used to emulate his teacher Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, the Qawwali singer from Pakistan, right? So I was just emulating sort of the way I thought it should sound or something, you know. And then I added sort of techno beats to it. So it's a kind of Indian techno with tabla and my chanting and this kind of thing. And that, I you know, again, rediscovered, I listened, this is kind of cool. And so I started playing with that. And then I had a piece called Entranced, which was originally for a side project I had called Malo23, MALO23 is a moniker I sometimes use for email and things, you know, MA Marc Lowe 23. But never did, you know, release that project CD I'd made, this Entranced. So again, I start playing with the mix, and I like that. So that's kind of techno, has beats. So I have all this beat-heavy material, and then there was some noisier pieces when I started getting into more noise, using noise, you know, like hizumi, right? Distortion and things, and using that with beats, longer pieces, mostly instrumental. Some vocalizations or vocals or spoken word, but mostly instrumental. And there was a piece called Anger, and so I played with that a bit. I left it almost the same, but I played with it a bit, has some beats and noisy stuff. So I started putting together this as an album or a compilation of something, starting with the kind of techno-ish and the Indo-techno, Indian sounding techno piece, and then moving into the noisier pieces. And then I had this starting a cappella piece, which I called Begrabnis. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It was the German for funeral. I retitled it in English Funeral. Played with that. It has some beats at the end. And some other things like this. And I compiled it as an album I called Shinigami, which means God of Death, which is kind of like Destroyer of Worlds. It kind of connects with the last album, right? Because I'm doing this in a short time span. Most of it was material I had already recorded, and I'm just rearranging it and remixing it and stuff, right? So I did Shinigami, and I was like, what do I use for a cover? I went all the way back to 2020, and this photo I had taken at a shrine, which has a woman leaving the shrine wearing a mask. It was during the COVID, people still wearing masks, actually. It wouldn't be that different now, but it was before vaccinations, and people were, really scared, including myself. And everyone's wearing masks. Again, it hasn't really changed in Japan. Frankly, people are still wearing masks, although it's not quite as dangerous. But so it's a woman wearing a kimono. That's the other thing. She's wearing a kimono. I think it was around New Year's, maybe. I went to this shrine by myself, and it was during a time when I was not feeling well, about many things, and hurting, and the beginning of my sort of lonerness, you could say, and I wasn't really very happy at the time. But I went to this shrine by myself, and I took this photo, and I made it black and white, and I used it for something else a bit. But anyway, I liked the photo, and you can see the characters for gate and god, kami, which is Japanese god or deity, I guess. And that word is in shinigami. So I called it Shinigami, and I wrote it in English and put the Japanese characters, kanji, Chinese characters, you could say, and was going to release it that way. It was, originally it was 6 tracks, and then I kind of found some other material that fit, and I, again, refreshed it, and it ended up being 8 tracks, and it was 59 minutes. I was like, that's cool. It's 8 tracks, it's an hour, almost an hour long. That's enough, that's great. I'm going to release this as Shinigami. And I popped it up on my Bandcamp page. It's still there now as Shinigami, 8 tracks. The last track on Shinigami is a new track, you could say. It was a sample that I did recently. I just sampled something, and I sampled this sort of water boiling type sound. And I won't say how I got that. It wasn't a pot on my stove, actually. It was something else. But and I used that and layered it and effectorized it, and I used a sample of the Dalai Lama talking about why don't we use our brains to find inner peace within ourselves, and be compassionate toward ourselves and towards others, rather than creating weapons for war, like nuclear warheads and for killing. And he says, killing is the opposite of compassion. War is killing. Killing is the opposite of compassion. We should use our head for inner peace, not for weapons and killing. And I thought, yeah.
This radio station, First World War, Second World War, even everyone prepared for Third World War. War means killing. Just the opposite of compassion.
That was to be the last track, and is the last track on Shinigami on the 8-track version. So 7 tracks are from the vaults, redone, and then that's the final track. It's this new track with the Dalai Lama, with this message, and Shinigami, again, destroyer of worlds, god of death, because, again, this is very much the theme of this kind of thing, too, right? But that's mostly older material, and ends with the Dalai Lama saying, let's have inner peace and not war, not killing. And then I did this curry song, okay? And how it connects to that is that I use the same sample of that boiling sound, but in a different way, and kind of quiet. And it sounds like, you can imagine it's like curry boiling on the stove kind of thing. And I did this song. And the song, you could say, so it's about curry, right? But as I was going to say before, the theme is the last night it's a couple who, the very last night, they ate curry together. And use your imagination. Does that mean they broke up? Does that mean something else happened? It was the last curry. Okay, so that's, it was for a curry contest, for an event with people having fun eating and drinking. I played in front of all these people. I can show another clip of that when I edit this. The sound wasn't very good, but... But I thought, it's got a kind of... My Japanese friends heard it and said it was a cute song. Cute, but I didn't think of it as a cute song. It's cute because I'm thinking about curry. Wasn't it so delicious, right? Is the lyric. It's cute, and this couple talking about it, but actually it's the last night, it's called. So anyway, I recorded it, and then I really, really wanted to do a cover version of David Bowie's After All, because I'm teaching a course on David Bowie. It's my second time doing it at university. Last Friday, when I taught it, I showed the Cracked Actor documentary from 1974, Bowie and he's all coked out. And very interesting documentary. If you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube. And at one point, they're showing all these kids who were like, wow, watching his live shows and stuff. And in the background, they're playing, the soundtrack they're using in this during the scene of the documentary. The director, whoever, decided to use "After All" from 1970's "Man Who Sold the World." And I hadn't heard that song in a long time. I haven't listened to "The Man Who Sold the World," that album, full album, in a while. And I covered all the Mad Men from that album earlier this year. And I put it on Same As We, and I did a video for it. And I did 2 videos for it. One, Akiko Honda filmed me performing it at night in the park.
And they tell me that I should blow to the far side of town, where it's pointless to be high, 'cause it's such a long way down.
But I hadn't listened to the full album in a while, and I'd forgotten. After all, it played during the scene, and I was like, this is a really good song, and I really like this, and I really want to do it. So I think it was Friday night, actually. I came home after that day, worked, taught 3 classes, made dinner, whatever, and then I recorded the Curry song, and then I was like, I want to do it After All. I just really wanted to do it. And then I thought, I'm going to do it on the classical guitar rather than the Guild, which is the standard acoustic, which I did the Curry song on the last night, Saigo no Yoru. And by the way, that song's sung in Japanese. Saigo no Yoru is the actual title, actually. Put it in the English title too. And so I practiced it. I looked up like the basic chords, and then I kind of changed some of them. I tend to arrange things my own way and play them in my own style. I don't follow exactly what's written and try to copy. But I got the basic, it's E minor, it's an E minor, starts in E minor, and I sort of got the basic chord structure, and then I sort of played with it and sort of did an improv in the middle, and I recorded that on the classical, and I sang in a quiet voice. It was getting later at night. I couldn't play loud, but that's actually the way the song should be. It's a very quiet, almost whisper voice. Not whisper, but quiet. After all. And then that too, I added some, effectorization kind of things in the background to make it sort of atmospheric. So then I had the 2 songs. And the following day I was like, I'm going to add one more song to this and make it a 3 or 4 track EP. And then I did a new recording of What Had You Done, which was actually the second song I had revisited from the past for the second album in the tetralogy. The song is coming called The Bird First, right, which became Broken Wing, and then I had done Ryuji and my song Forest and re-entitled it What Had You Done, and I did that version, and I had an electronic version which went on the album that came after, which I did new vocals on it, and I rearranged it, and then I played it live a number of times because it's just become like Chaos, which I re-recorded so many times and done new versions, different styles. This song has become kind of like that, although the style hasn't changed that much.
Through a lens inside your mind, through the voices in your head, try to see but you are blind. Try to do all and the branches swung wild. The trees bent down, down, down. Such a haunted child.
And I thought, I want to do something different with it. I just want to do a recording of it, like a recording, not just a live recording or in my room kind of recording, which I've done before. But I want to do a something different with it, and more freeform, but with the guild, on the guild. Well, the previous recording was on the iBus, and it had the nature sounds in the background, which were sampled from the park. And this time I thought, I had started working on another ambient piece, basically, with just the electronic stuff, and I thought, wait a minute, I can combine this with this ambient thing and make it a new, really different sound. And I did. And the lyrics I changed a bit, sort of improv, changed them a bit. The playing styles changed a bit. There's a longer sort of improvised middle section from the year, if you compare from last year's Sun is Coming version. And when I sang the part about the child, it was, I think originally it was a haunted child or lonesome child, in some cases lonesome child, and I think the lonesome child was the electronic version I called, so I called this the haunted child. And then in parentheses, what had you done, so that people who know that song, that version, can recognize that it's another version of this. And the ambient part continues, and I sort of improv at the end, and that's the closer. So that became the In-Yo EP. In-Yo is the Japanese pronunciation for yin-yang. I didn't want to call it yin-yang because then people have that image, it's Chinese and it's yin-yang, right? People in America say yin-yang. It's not. In-Yo means it's light and dark. And the cover actually had recently taken in the park, I had gone to this sort of National Treasure Park that's near where I live. I bought a yearly pass, and I go there and take walks, or, to be in nature. It's sort of like in the middle of the city, but it's like a refuge from the city, and I love it. And when Japanese people in Japan, when we're talking in Japanese, they say, what's your philosophy, theme, your music? I say in to yo, light and dark. And it's the combination of light and dark. My music can be very dark, but there's also light. There is a Light from 2020, one of the darkest albums ever. When I was hit the bottom or near bottom of, maybe I got a little lower before I started bouncing up again, but toward the bottom of that barrel, I did Untitled in 2020, and the cover of that even, which again I can show when I edit, it's very dark, and you can see part of my face and the curtain, and I made it, effectorize it intentionally dark, but there's a bit of light trying to creep through. And the last track on that extremely dark album, which is all electronic, no guitar, by the way, that album, the last track is There Is a Light, and it's a hopeful song. So there's always light within the dark, dark within the light. You can't have shade without a light. You can't have, one without the other. I felt that the flow was just, I liked it, and I thought, okay, now I have to decide, do I call this Shinigami? Do I call it In-Yo? Do I use the Shinigami cover art, or do I use the In-Yo cover art? And, or do I do something else to make a new cover? And do I retitle it? So first I thought, I'm just going to call it Shinigami. It's the extended version. I attached the EP. And then I thought, no, I'm going to make it, it's going to be In-Yo, because it's light and darkness, right? You have the harshness in the beginning, darkness in the end, kind of like the world was not the same, right? It's got the different styles. It's got the acoustic stuff, it's got the ambient stuff, it's got the, right? And then it's got the older material refreshed. And this too has the older material refreshed, although it's more experimental material for sure, but with the beats and stuff. Then I thought, wait a minute. I took this photo, and this goes back to how the cover art matches. And how it wasn't intentional. Droplets of water, right? They're filmed in two different, they're taken in two different places. This one was taken, like I say, was in the mirror, and I, had the water on the mirror. I had my makeup on here. It was on the cover of the Vivid Scores, right, with the makeup. And I shot that photo and I liked it, and I was going to use for 1123 originally, which I talked about, and that's the scrap cover art, you could say. This literally might sound strange to some of you, but I was taking a bath, and I had actually, I think that day I had cleaned out the bath completely, and I had been spraying the entire bath, you know. In Japan, the bathroom is a separate room, if you will, and so the ceiling, you know, it's got like a drain, and so the ceiling, everything is, you know, it goes into the drain. You put the fan on. There's no toilet in the bathroom. In my bathroom, it's just a bath. So the ceiling, which is a kind of plastic covering thing in that room, was, you know, had these droplets of water on it from, I had been cleaning it, and then I was sitting in the bath. There was steam and water and whatever, you know, so the album name will be 1123. So then this was the cover, and I start thinking, okay, so I'm going to do the typical thing, Marc Lowe with the Chinese characters that I've made for my name, which I've talked about before, which, you know, the wandering or wave, and then the space between. I had the Waves Between Emptiness album, which was one way of translating that. And then I thought, you know, and I'll just put, you know, in numerals, 1123, like that one has the numbers, Roman numerals 1123. And I said, no. At first I was going to handwrite it out, but then I thought, why don't I use the kanji, the Chinese characters? Ichi, ichi, ni, san, 1, 1, 2, 3, because they're just lines. 1, 2, 3. They're easy to understand even if you don't know Chinese characters, because it's 1 line, 2 lines, and 3 lines. And that became the cover. That became the title. It will be released on January 11th, 2023. Sing with importance. Shading impermanent chords. Borrowed your time, and I'm sorry I called. Oh, but the thought just occurred that we're nobody's children after all. After all. So bad me no will. Very grim.